Yeah.
Good evening, Daniel. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, so you are running for House Representative, right?
Yes.
And that's District 9,
Yes. Indiana Congressional District 9.
right? And uh, we were talking about before this that the current incumbent decided not to run for re-election.
Yeah. Trey Hollingsworth set himself on a term limit. He
Okay.
signed a term limit agreement. Sorry about that.
What?
And so he hit his 10-year requirement, and the state GOP asked him if he was going to run again, and he decided he wasn't.
Oh, wow. Well, how come he had 10 years?
Um, so within the United States, there's problems with the electoral system, and they've the common voter wants to have integrity within the government, and one of those steps that they do is they try to limit people that are in power. If you look at other elected officials, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, is a classic example.
Right,
She has been in office almost her entire life. There's
right.
photos of her with Kennedy when he was president, and she
Uh-huh.
was working in the party at that time. So
Wow.
career politicians, from what the founding fathers or the architects had originally created under the Constitution, that was not their idea, to
No,
have career politicians.
right.
If you read anything about Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin, I think was another great working. Benjamin Franklin said that it's the call to service
Mhm.
that drove him to be in politics. And then you
Right,
look at President Washington didn't believe in political parties. So
right,
in the modern era of the United States government and political system, you have career politicians,
right,
and they become somewhat of continuity, but also can be a detriment to the constituency within that district.
right. So that's where you can have the establishment, right?
Yes.
Both GOP and Democrats, they all have their own establishment,
Mhm.
and a lot of times they actually decide who can run or at least who can win an election.
Yeah. There
Mhm.
was a great study done to teach children, and it was, I want to say sixth graders, 12-year-olds. And what they did is there's this nonprofit organization that teaches government. And
Mhm.
they went into the school with sixth graders, and they had the sixth graders create a list of each of the students, and each of the students was in a political leadership role for the class throughout the year. So
Mhm.
it rotated.
Okay.
And so a child who didn't want to do student council ended up being assigned student council for this week.
Mhm.
But what it taught all of them is it taught them the understanding of government and working with their community and supporting their constituency. And those are bigger words than what we're told to 12-year-olds, but
Right.
it definitely taught them this world lesson of the greater purpose and
Mhm.
what you have to do to serve the community. When we look at
Right.
this newer generation of students and people that are coming into the workforce, they don't typically focus on their ancestry for that. It's intrinsic knowledge. It's information that you and I have that we've learned from our parents and our
Mhm.
grandparents, and it's
Right.
historically passed down because they're taught differently. But this program taught those children about how you can learn from your friends and you can participate within your community, and there's something to be passed on. So it had its benefits. It's
Right.
really
Yeah.
kind of a cool study. I think you could
It
watch it
is.
online.
It's actually a nice program,
Mhm.
and sometimes like in a way like for Americans, politics is not that direct. I
No.
mean, there is indirect effect and all that. So many of us do not pay much attention to it, which in a way is good, right? That means the government is not that powerful. But the flip side is that we didn't do our due diligence to really make sure the right people get elected.
Yes. Well, that's something that's been interesting with my campaign. There's a total of 9 candidates in this race,
Wow.
and I am a traditional, very traditional conservative views on my country, my faith, and being a good person. Just basically the way I was raised spiritually. So I am friends with some of the other candidates. Like this
Mm,
evening, I had dinner with one of the candidates, and he and I sat there and we talked about our worldly views and
mm,
our ideals and what we can do to help the community. And
mm,
it's I think that there's a need for that in all governments and all politics, that there should be more honesty, more
Right.
truth, more of the focus of what's in the heart and the mind than just this selfish need to raise funds and be, when you look at the candidates with the most money, they're creating the most problems. They're fighting against each other, and they're doing advertisements attacking each other. And
Right.
so we've told them to not do that, that it's not the right thing to do. I mean, it's just not, it's very demeaning, especially to the society and the group of people around.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, those negative attacks
Yeah.
in many cases worked.
Yes. Yes, it's relevance because our society thinks that it's all right.
Right.
We see it in the news, we see it
Mhm.
on social media, and we're comfortable with it and we expect it.
Yeah.
If you look at President Obama and his wife Michelle Obama,
Hmm.
they would use the saying that we take the high road when they take the low road.
Hmm.
And when you run for political office, you have to make your personal ideological choice. What are
Mm.
your values? And if you want to do that, and you want
Right.
to attack someone, you have to hold that the rest of your life and inside who you are. And no, I'm not that individual, so I don't do that.
That is very good. Very good. So now, what kind of what's your experience that which help you to be a representative?
So I've been in the military over 20 years in the United States Army.
Um,
Just in the past 5 years, I've worked with United States Central Command, and I worked with legislative body uh, on the Hill, Joint
mm,
Staff, the Pentagon, and also working with the leadership with the House Arms Committees and Senate Arms Committees, and dealing with the national budget under the National Defense Appropriations Act, NDAA. So I had some recent, really close experience with elected officials.
mm,
The experience of leadership, being in the military, and understanding to be a servant leader
right.
and
Yeah.
be more of a statesman and help individuals and serve them instead of thinking that you're in charge. That's been a lot of development as well. When I was younger, and I'm 40, but when I say I was younger, I know I'm talking about like 25 to 30. In that time frame, I worked with local groups, nonprofits. I supported governments, other elected officials. I've helped with being a precinct committeeman,
Mm,
a delegate, a congressional district chairman. So I've had broad experiences in
right. Yeah.
helping. Yeah.
Mm. And I mean, uh, uh, before our interview, you said you are the work traveler. So I guess being in the military, that definitely helped you to travel around the world.
Yes, I've enjoyed it. So 2010, I was in Haiti after the earthquake. It was
Um,
it was beautiful in a sense where the epicenter of the earthquake occurred with nature. It had created a split, like a vertical and a horizontal split that made a natural cross in the side of the mountain.
oh, wow.
And the under all the dirt was this white stone. So here's this beautiful cross on this mountain range that you can see all over the valley of the capital of Haiti. It was gorgeous,
That's
but you learn a
sweet.
lot being there, going around and that's part of it. Americans typically have a bad rap of going around the world and not being accepting of other cultures. When I was in Europe, whether in Germany or Italy or Venice, or when I was in Asia or Sub-Asia
Mm,
or Saudi Arabia or any country that I've ever gone into, it's always beautiful to accept the cultures. In Afghanistan, up in the mountains,
wow.
you would walk out and it was just the thought that God created light and light is good. But I would go into to see the provincial governor, and we would talk, and it wasn't that forceful discussion of Americans saying this is what you should do. It was me talking to him about, well, how are you doing, and
Mm,
what can we do to help with what you're trying to do. And it's
right.
beautiful here, and you can smell this jasmine in the air, and conversations like that.
Right.
Just
Right. Right.
but and then we would have tea and other discussions. It's I mean, it's part of it. Is if you're going to travel the world, you need to see the beauty in all of it. You can't
Right.
just think that, yeah, you have to really enjoy life.
Well, thank you so much for your service.
Oh,
Uh,
appreciate it.
yeah, when we say like freedom is not free, and that in most part is because people like you who, who enlisted in the army, which keep us safe.
Yes, I love doing it. I love I love our country. I love
Mm,
America. I
right.
want to make sure that everyone has the ability. You know, you've traveled, and I've worked with other countries, you know, NATO countries, and we've done
Mm,
work abroad. So it's when you go to a country and you see that they need that there is a need, and you want to help them with that.
right.
It's really just important. I mean, what we do, and I appreciate your support, and I love serving my country. It's been the greatest thing to do, especially working and training younger generations to pass on to them that knowledge. Like I said earlier, that continuity or intrinsic information that you and I have,
Yeah.
and making sure that they have it for the next generation,
Yeah.
and that they do what's right.
Mm. Well, I did encourage my kids, my children. I have a boy and a girl, to be get involved with the military. Well, my son, he's not that interested, but my daughter now, she's working with uh, uh, Air Force contractor. So
Yeah.
in some way, I'm glad that we can do something. It's kind of as an immigrant, and it's really our, in a way, to express our gratitude, to be, to be American.
Yeah,
And
I
that,
have two daughters, and you know, I love my girls. I want them to have a great future, just like any parent should strive to
mhm.
do. Um, but I keep telling my oldest daughter that she should go into Space Force. She's really good with math.
Wow.
So
I
I'm
love
always,
that.
and you know, Space Force doesn't mean she would be an astronaut, but it
Right, right,
definitely
right, right.
means that she would support a greater purpose, a greater mission. I mean, our goal is to colonize the moon. And I
Mhm.
know Elon Musk's goal is to colonize Mars, but
Mhm.
if we could just
Mhm.
start with the moon, that would be ideal,
Yep.
and start, you know, working on it. I think one thing that I've noticed when I've spoken to astronauts before is that when they left Earth, they realized how precious it was.
Mhm. Exactly, because we have been searching for other forms of life, and so far we are the only one, uh, in a
Yeah,
vast universe.
yeah,
And
yeah.
which
That's
is amazing, right? I mean, that's the only, in a way, only planet is so beautiful.
it is.
Mm.
I love outer space studies and information. I'm not that much of a nerd, but I love nerding out on outer space.
Yeah. Well, I assume you are following the current Russia-Ukraine
Yes,
war.
yes, yeah.
Okay. Maybe we can have some, maybe have a kind of like a talk about it.
Okay, yeah.
Uh,
Let's go. What do you want to talk about?
Not right now. Today we're just focused on uh, uh, your uh, your
Yeah, no, it's
campaign.
the Russia talk would be great. I took about 2, 3 years of studying Putinism,
Oh,
which deals with Vladimir Putin, and then we've one of the things that I worked on last in the government was cognitive analysis, which deals with human dynamic decision making
okay,
processes,
okay.
and it deals with artificial intelligence with machine learning and deep learning capability. It's
Mm.
real AI. It's not automation or functions.
Right, right, right,
It's
right.
actually, yeah, it was a real AI ability to look at opposition, and it used you know, bootleg theorems along with other scenarios, and it created studies that dealt with iterations of possibilities thousands upon thousands of times over,
Oh,
and
wow.
then those studies would be based off of a decision making process for
Mm.
leadership, or how they would interact in a negotiation or a
Oh,
discussion.
wow. So you have a kind of very advanced model.
Yes, I could probably provide you with a brief, and we could discuss it, and you get a better idea.
Yeah,
I
let's,
mean, just the mathematics, statistical studies alone,
right,
it was pretty amazing. A lot of great work.
right. Well, we'll do that. We'll just have a dedicated time to talk about the war, because I'm actually following it very closely, and also I also uh, follow close the, the potential war between
Yes,
China and Taiwan, and so yeah,
that's an. I think that's inevitability. I know I have
right,
friends who are deployed over there now, and I know that's their plan to take back Taiwan.
right, yeah.
Um,
It's really just a matter of when.
yes, yeah, there's been papers published on it. There's weekly discussions about it. Uh, I've been in on discussions with a few of the former admirals and generals.
Wow.
So it is one of the things that's discussed we can go into that discussion next time too if you want. There's
Yeah,
lots of there's
definitely.
a lot more. I mean that's like a long discussion.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think the thing is, it is very hard to understand what's going on just based on the media.
Yeah.
So the media really didn't do a good job to decrease, to dig it deeper to figure out what's going on. The more kind of reporting kind of things, a lot of noise. So anyway, let's go back to your campaign. And we talk about professional politicians.
Mhm.
And do you know how long was that? I mean, we have this phenomenon of someone who is a congressman for, the whole life.
Yeah, yeah, congressman for life. There are those congressmen for life out there. Professional politicians, there's a lot of problem just with the idea of a professional politician because there's there's a study, there's psychological studies that deal with what's referred to as the echo chamber that you
Mhm.
establish around yourself, or the
Right.
firehouse effect is another one where if you have a small group and you start coming up with ideas like, did you know the Pope was an alien? Next thing you know, everyone thinks the Pope's an alien. But and when you put yourself in those environments, over time, especially leadership believes because they become more narcissistic. There's no sort of Damocles telling them that they're still just a man. And
Mm,
then the problem that exists is over time they think they're infallible.
all right.
So there has to be, within leadership, there has to be a check. Now, as you become a professional politician, profession, basically a political shark in the waters, you're going to receive more money. Now, one of those problems that I was talking about earlier
Mhm,
with re-elections is after you're elected to Congress,
mhm.
or other political houses, there are House election committees that provide you with funding and means and ways to maintain being reelected. A sitting congressman has a 96% chance of being reelected
Oh,
because of those
wow.
additional supports. And
Wow.
that's government funding, that's tax dollars from the people that then is reappropriated and given to, you know, politicians. I it's not what originally was thought of in the Constitution. It doesn't go along with the Federalist policies. If you look at the Constitution and you look at the 10th Amendment, for example, which deals with that, that's where the problem exists, but we don't follow it. And then
Mhm,
there's ethics committees, but in government there really is no ethics. If you look at Ukraine,
mhm.
somebody was talking about Ukraine the other day to me at the Washington Post, and I told him about the Treaty of Minsk, which is in 1984, and then there was another revision of it, the Treaty of Minsk II in 2015. And essentially, the treaty is just political toilet paper because if they're not going to follow it, then
Right.
why have it?
Mhm,
And that's not good for the government. It's almost like a bond. It's like a transaction stock bond. And if you're not
mm.
willing to hold the credibility of that bond, then you lose interest and it loses value. So I was a
Yeah.
little upset by that.
Mm. Yeah, and also like the founding fathers actually warned us about it, right?
Yes.
About this. First of all, is partisan politics, which is really detrimental to our republic, and the second one is professional politicians, because in that way they are the law makers, right?
Yeah.
Because so so they are in a way they're above the law that they are going to make, which is really not good.
That's a terrible view though for them to have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably part of that problem, is that they believe that they're above the law, above the ways and
Right.
things. One of the issues that we're doing is I'm trying to reclaim our heritage here in southern Indiana, and someone was asking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it deals with so much more. When you're talking about heritage, you're talking about being strong. You're talking
Right.
about being empowered as a citizen, as a
Mm-hmm.
people, and not allowing your government to try and control you and overthrow you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and when you have an individual in power for life, that's not an elected official. That's a dictator. That's
Right. Right.
somebody, a tyrant. Uh, there needs to be more, and it comes down to the weaknesses that are not allowing you to amass. You're not able to group and create a force to change that.
Right.
um Yeah, there's the founding fathers. This is a strange thing to say, but it's accurate. There's not much difference between then and now.
Mm,
It's still the same problems.
okay.
Parents still want their children to be raised and have
Mm,
opportunities. There's still taxes.
mm,
There's more taxes.
right. There's definitely more.
We're all still trying to find our way in the world. We're all still fighting a fight.
Right.
Technology has improved. Yes, life expectancy is
Right.
longer, medicines and advancements have occurred. But when you get down to the basic needs and means of a family, not much has really changed.
Right. I think something changed is the uh, how people view the role of the government,
Yeah.
right? Because when we started, the government is really don't have that much power, and then over years, it's starting to uh, uh, become more powerful.
Yes.
Always, in a way, uh, try in the name of trying to do the good thing, right? To serve the people.
Hmm.
Like for example, the public education. I mean, it was good when it got started. I mean, a lot of people needs to get educated, and many people may not be able to afford to that, especially for immigrants at that time. You know, we're talking about 100 years ago or 200 years ago, people from like Ireland or from German, from Italy. I mean, they just cannot afford. So to have a public schools, it definitely helped. But now it become a tool for the so-called social justice warriors.
Yeah.
So in a way, they are trying to using that to have the to really indoctrinate our children to become social activists.
Yeah. There's You're absolutely correct. The education. So when I was growing up, I did a minor degree in history and
Mhm.
studied early American colonial. Uh, and 1800s was one of my focuses, around
Mm.
1830 to 1836, and education during that time as well, and how
Mhm.
education was done by communities, sponsored by schools, and were sponsored by churches
Right.
and communities. But if you look at today, yes, it is government funded and controlled. If you look at Florida and Governor DeSantis, I think he put an additional 800, what was it, 800,000 into education, and it was immediately absorbed by the upper echelons and never made it to the classrooms,
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's a government beast in itself, and it's
Right.
going to do that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
they're going to only develop the children geographically based off of the needs of what is ultimately the states or the area's GDP focus.
mhm.
When I was stationed in Florida, they really did focus a lot on mathematics.
Mm.
Mathematics was their biggest focus, STEM, and
Right.
the reason they did that is because it's a vacation. It's a traveling state where people come in, and they have to have people who work at Disney or work for a different corporation, and they're doing transactions. When we were stationed in New Jersey,
Mm.
east of Philly, up by New York, their focus was reading and writing.
Mm.
And so, my children are in school, and they focused heavily on reading and writing.
Mm.
And that area was more business desk, working on reports, type of production stuff,
Oh,
lawyers.
okay.
So you look at the geographical areas, and if you look at Indiana, their
Mm.
focus is a lot on agriculture,
Mm.
and some science mixed in with that,
Right.
and mostly trade craft, tech
Mm.
school stuff. And it goes like that throughout all of the world. When you look at people in those areas and what the schools try and do, education is the way to control the population, and that's been written in many books.
Oh, yeah. I
So
mean,
I've noticed with my children that it's a problem. So we
mm.
homeschool one of our children,
Mm.
because education wasn't working for her in public. And then we
Mm.
tried private school with her. We sent her
Mm.
to a Catholic school with
Mm.
the nuns and everything,
Mm.
and it just wasn't working out there to develop or get her to go. So my wife has a degree in education,
Mm.
and we brought her home and started teaching her at home. It's worked
Mm.
out very well.
Right.
We're able, to focus on what we need to focus on. Now, my other daughter, my oldest daughter, still goes to public education school, and she's doing very well.
Mhm.
But it is the responsibility of the parent to teach them things.
Right, exactly. I mean, parents has to be in charge, has to make sure
Yes.
their children get the right, really the adequate education.
Yes.
Yeah,
And the
because
life skills, like
right.
what you and I can teach them, as I said earlier about this culture of family and the
Mhm.
way it used to be and what we should bring back, where
Right,
I'm teaching my children and my parents and the grandparents are all teaching these life lessons and
right.
skills.
Yeah.
That's important. That's the invaluable reality. My grandmother who raised me survived the Depression,
Mhm.
and her knowledge from that time, and then she was in World War II.
Right,
She had experience, and she could just learning from her about those life
right, right.
lessons and she raised me. It
Yeah.
has been helpful in my wealth of
Mhm.
experience to pass on to my children.
Right. And that's what we call social capital, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's very important for the children. Not only they need some financial capital, I think more important is social capital, which they can learn from their parents or grandparents, and also the connections they have, right? Um, Between families, which that's what build a healthy community, right?
Yeah. Yes, because so right now in the United States, we're already cycling into another recession. They won't declare the recession until there's in economics, it's two negative quarters. But the Dow Jones, the S&P 500, and the Nasdaq all did the death cross, which is where
Mm,
they go into a negative. And
mm,
then the cost of oil being at such a high
right.
are all indicators that reflect 2007, 2008 within the American economy, and that led to the recession.
Mm,
Now, the only thing that happened during that time that corrected it was government in 2009 came and said that the Fed can't use mark to market format to come
mm,
out of the recession. So when you look at where we're at right now, and my experience and my family's experience from the 2008 to
mm,
2010 period, we have historical experience
right.
to survive this pending recession that we're in.
Right. Yeah.
But if you look at this, I think they're called millennials. Is it millennials or centennials? It's this newer generation, this new group of workforce that has come
Okay.
out.
It's millennial,
Yeah,
millennial. Yeah, and also Gen Zers.
oh yeah, Gen Z. Okay, so those are the ones. Those are the ones. All right, the
Okay.
Gen Zers do not remember
Right.
because they
Right.
weren't
Right.
old enough to.
Right.
And so the problem with culture is they're not going back, or they're not listening to their parents or any of their siblings about it. But how they will survive this time frame is going to be very revealing. I do know from studies that I've been reading about the Gen Zers and these upcoming other generations is that the generation right now in the age group of 10, I think it's 10 to 5 years old, is going to be the next great generation,
Oh.
because the way that they're receiving all this experience from parents like myself,
Okay.
or the parents who have this knowledge base that they're teaching them, like my daughters, they don't have allowances, they don't get money, I don't give them money, they
Hmm.
have to earn money, they
Right.
do chores, and then they make so much money and they can get taxed or they can get fined.
Hmm.
If they want to buy something, they have to use their money.
Right.
I'm the bank and they can negotiate, but those
Right.
experiences are going
That's
to help
great.
them to
Yeah.
be that generation that's going to be the great generation.
Right.
I just want to make sure though that they contribute to it and that they're good people.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, the things I'm kind of hopeful for this country is because a lot of people like you homeschool their children, so that their children are really have those knowledge and skills, and they'll become the future leaders of this
Yeah.
country. Yeah. And okay. So uh, what are the top three things that you are running on?
Well, one thing you've probably been able to tell is that I'm running on dealing with family culture and bringing back, family, and that's part of reclaiming American heritage is
Mhm.
re-empowering families. With COVID, they had the straw man fight where they were told that they had to listen to the government and they had to wear their masks and they had to give
Mm.
up their rights for security and the issues there. So I try to explain to people that my number one issue is making sure that they understand that they are empowered as citizens in this country to make a decision. And and to enforce, not have the government enforce, but to
Right.
enforce the government be correct,
Yeah.
and the government do what's right. Number two issue usually deals with inflation and the debt. So
Mm,
it's within the government, the debt's out of control. And I know if they're going to forgive the student loans, which they were talking about the student debt,
mm,
and that's about $1.6 trillion. And I know that everyone's been telling me, well, we're already at 30 trillion. And that shocks me. And I tell them to stop and think about how they're okay with $30 trillion.
right. Right.
But one point that I make about that debt, everyone tells you in media that that debt is for the poor. The poor has that debt. That's not true. The majority of the debt, if you look at it, belongs to the upper class echelons that have gone on to get masters and doctorates.
Mm,
And then they've gone out and they've become, well-paid professionals. So when you're really talking about debt, student loan debt relief, you're talking about giving cash to the upper class.
mm.
And it's entertaining that it's been spun by the media. So my number two issue usually deals with inflation and debt. And my number three issue is more focused on trying to deal with the security issue. There's a unfortunate sin that occurs in this country of the United States, which is human trafficking.
Oh, yeah.
And it's ignored. It's
Right.
blindly ignored. And
Yeah.
no one wants to talk about it, and
Right.
they want to ignore it, because if you acknowledge that you have sinned, then you're a sinner.
Right.
But if you know the scripture and you read any of it, especially the New Testament, Titus chapter 3, it's just, we have to talk about it. We have to do something about
Right.
it.
Right. Right.
And so it's one of my initiatives. It's one of my focuses, even
That's
elected or
yeah.
not.
That's wonderful. Do you know Hope Center Indy?
No.
Yeah, Hope Center Indy is the largest residential facility for survivors of human trafficking. So I volunteer there as their education director. So my job is to help them to get GED and then help them to get into college
That's amazing.
or
Email
get
me
into.
and I will donate and support that.
Wonderful. I actually
Yeah,
can give you a tour if
that'd
you
be
want.
great. Yeah, that'd be great. That is, I mean, that's part of the mission, is to do good. So I've already gone out and I've found groups and churches that will support this initiative.
Mhm.
After May 3rd, the primary, by May 17th, we're having a meeting and we're moving forward in
Wow.
starting this. And it's basically to be very aggressive. We'll support lobbying groups. We'll support other groups such as yours. But we will. One of the ways that we found that would best affect reducing it is to bring sort of the pressure, if you can say it that way, bring the pressure to the people that are causing this sin. This
Right,
problem.
right. And one thing we found is that there's a lot of girls from the foster system.
Yes.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is so,
Yeah.
yeah.
In Europe, they're having this problem. We have a friend of ours who had to go over to Europe, to Poland. The mass exodus of women and children from Ukraine
Mm,
is just, it's a diaspora of people, and into Poland alone was 2.7 million people.
right,
And there's people along the southern border of the United States, Ukrainians that are trying to get into the country. And it deals with visas and governments, and there's so many government political issues. But what is occurring is, as these people are fleeing the Ukraine, they are being picked up by coyotes, or people
oh,
that are going to turn them into sex slaves, and they don't
right,
know any
right,
better.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's we had a friend of ours we sent over from the church with a group to Poland to help start an initiative and stop this.
Wonderful. That's great because uh, uh, after the Berlin Wall came down, I mean, there are good, I mean, the good part of it is now Eastern Germany and West Germany become one, and then you have a lot of former European countries become part of the EU. But the unfortunate part of it, there's a lot of human trafficking going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's a terrible sin that no one's talking about. And
Mm,
when I'm interviewing with I was interviewing with Yahoo News, and I mentioned that along with other problems that are occurring. they don't want to talk about it because it doesn't sell newspapers or it
Right.
doesn't work on the TV and the media. And I
Right.
go, great, then don't write about it, but I'm still going to keep doing something about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I mean, definitely. Yeah, I think you're like what we are doing at Hope Center.
Yeah, I would love to get a tour. That'd be
Yeah.
great.
And we also have a canine training facilities on campus. And those are special kind of dogs will, they can sniff out the electronics that the pedophile are using. So then like the USB sticks and, kind of things. So they actually help police um, to arrest many, many people who, that's like unthinkable. Like those are doing to those little children's.
It's upsetting on some levels. It's just heartbreaking.
Right. And,
So part of our program is going to deal with how when we rescue these victims, how they're treated and how they recover is
right.
important.
Yeah, that's
Um,
yeah. I mean, that's what we do at Hope Center. So basically, it's a year and a half residential program.
mhm.
So they go to like 5 different phases, basically, so that they can recover, like
Yeah.
spiritually and
Yeah, we
emotionally.
really do need to work together on this because
Yeah.
I mean I don't see a need to recreate the wheel, as they say,
Mhm.
if there's already programs that exist. Instead, it would be my effort to fund your programs
Okay,
and make them exist.
that'd be
Uh,
great.
and that's really, that's the idea of it. And then there's the other initiatives, the lobbying, legislative issues that need to be taken care of,
Right.
supporting law enforcement,
Right.
and providing them with the additional means and coordination of intelligence collections. So sometimes within areas, you'll have sex trafficking that's occurring, but the
Right.
local law enforcement doesn't know about it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's part of intelligence and information collection that's being provided. So, like the FBI, the DEA, other individuals might know about it, but they
Mhm.
haven't shared that information. So that, that's part of this process.
Right. It's happening. I think in some ways has to be kind of handled like a military operation, right? You have the central command, so you can.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about providing. I mean,
Right.
we have a group that's been created that's working on this, and it's a think tank that's getting everything built out that will help support that ability. Um, It'll be great.
Right.
I will when I get we're all just souls carrying around a body,
Hmm.
and when it's time for me to go,
Yeah.
I will know that I have done the Lord's work. That's my goal.
Exactly. I mean, as Christians, that's what uh, we have to give a we have to give account,
Yes.
right? When we die, when we meet Christ. I mean, what did we do with uh, the things that God has blessed us with, right?
Mhm.
Our finance, our health, and our intelligence, and all that, right? Those are kind of like the parable of the talents. So we have to give accounting.
Yeah, I look forward to Jesus's hug saying, "My good and faithful servant."
Right, exactly. That's what actually keep me going.
It's a great
Sometimes,
week, though. I mean, this is a great week. You got to think, we're about
yeah,
to have Easter. Everything's working out for us.
right,
So,
right,
yeah.
yeah. There's one thing I like to ask you is about the Department of Education,
Yes.
and for me personally, I want to see that abolished. I don't
The
know
whole
what's
the
your
whole
take.
thing abolished, or do you want an absolute reform?
I don't think we can reform it. I think it probably is better just abolish the whole thing and let the states to have more power to handle education.
Yes. So I think I don't know if I said it, but I'm a strict federalist, a
Mhm.
conservative federalist, which means states have the ability to make their own decisions.
Right. I
And
mean,
that would be education as well. The Department of Education program, how funding is done, where all of it's pooled together and it's disseminated. I understand what they're trying to do. Anybody who studies it would understand what the government's trying to do, but it doesn't work anymore. And so it
no.
does need to be reformed, or it needs to be completely redone. which might be the next level. Charter schools in Indiana have shown a lot of that.
Mhm.
Chartering in other states. When we were stationed in Florida, you had the voucher system, and then
Mhm.
Indiana's doing the voucher system.
Right.
So what I mean, if anybody's confused by that, that's where essentially your student, you take them out of this school A and you move them to school B gets the funding from
Mhm.
the voucher. So wherever your money goes, and you don't have to live in that area.
Right.
Um, the flaws in education too that I've noticed also deal with the leadership. When we were in Franklin, Indiana, just south of Indianapolis,
Mhm.
our school had an issue with not the teacher, but the other students. And the teacher couldn't do anything about it because this teacher didn't have the support of the principal or the
Right.
superintendent.
Yeah.
So it is not the educator, it is the leadership that is
Oh, yeah.
also
Yes.
discussion.
Right.
And when you
Definitely.
do that to reform everything, I think you have a valid point. The Department of Education, you can't reform it, but the
Mhm.
states could address it and they could fix it at
Right.
the local
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, education is the local issue,
Yeah.
right? Has been
Yes.
like that.
Has to
But
be.
yeah, but there is a, a effort that is trying to make that more federalized. That the
I can,
yeah.
yeah. I've heard
And,
about this. Yeah.
right. So there is kind of two, ways. There's uh, two different educational philosophies there are in conflict. One is like the more traditional conservative, uh, the parents have control of the education. The other one is really the progressive way of how they look at education. That is, the government is providing education that parents are not, they just parents just go along with it. Parents has no control over it.
It's because it's been generations of pacification. It's been not pacification, but well, the mix of that along with programming, being told that this is how it is and
All
this
right.
is how it will always be, and they're fine with that. My father, Doug Heiwig, is an economics professor, doctorate level, and he
Oh,
also teaches master's level of
okay.
economics. And from time to time, he'll still teach the 100 series to talk to the kids. But what he talks to them about, and he really likes to challenge them,
Mhm.
but what he asks them sometimes is questions that make them think in a way such as, before government provided means and subsidies and helped people in the community so that if they were poor or homeless and gave them food, who did that? Who would help them?
Mhm.
And you've got a class of young adults, or now adults, because he's been doing it for so long, he's been a college professor for years, and they would say, well, before the government, no one did it. And he would sit there and he'd listen to all their little stories, and he'd say,
Mhm.
no, before the government was telling you that they were in control and everyone believed it, it was the community,
All right.
it was the church,
You're right.
it was the neighbor,
You're
because
right.
that's what they were taught to do.
Mhm.
And that's how they grew up, and they grew up
Mhm.
and they worked together to better their community.
Right.
And he remembered that from when he was a young man.
Right.
But Reagan said it, we're always just one generation away, and sometimes I worry that I'm in the last generation.
Yeah. I guess we should, right, in a way, keep us vigilant, because
Yes.
this is big in the fight. Like for me, I'm concerned about my children and my grandchildren, and I'm part of the baby boomers, and in a way, baby boomers had it easy, right? And I think this should be our fight. Is really, I mean, before we leave this world, I think that should be our last fight. Is make sure that our children, grandchildren still live free. Yeah. I mean, if you throw out history, is always that. Is like the government becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, always in the name of doing good. But once you give them the power to do good, then they can abuse that power to do bad, right? Then eventually you get into a dictatorship. Um, so we have to be really on guard for that. Okay, so the final thing is, how about abortion? What's your view on that?
I'm pro-life.
Is that
I'm pro-life, and there's a pastor up in Detroit, and every
Mm.
night he goes to the abortion clinic
Mhm.
and he gets the bodies of babies out of the dumpster, and he takes them back to the church, and there's a group, and they bathe them and they wrap them, and then he blesses them and he buries them.
Oh, wow.
And I cannot imagine the toll that that does emotionally or
Mhm.
psychologically, but that is a blessed man. It's my wife and I, we've talked about it. We know we're going to be foster parents. We know we'll adopt later in life. Life is so valuable. It's in the scripture. I'm not going to go to an abortion clinic and violently protest it, but I do have friends, and I go and we would go and we would pray
All
for
right.
those people. I
Yeah.
mean, it's I have fought for people's constitutional freedoms and their rights, but I am pro-life.
Mhm. So do you believe that life start at conception?
Yes.
So the abortion should be abolished?
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you probably know John Jacob, right?
I do.
Okay, yeah. We were friends for many years.
Okay.
So yeah, he has been there to you know preaching gospels on the street and
Yeah.
also ministry at the abortion clinic.
Yeah.
But
Philip
he had
Christian, he has a group from his church that go and they pray outside of the abortion clinics.
right.
They've gotten in troubles before. Yeah.
Yeah, he has a lot of oppositions actually in the Indiana uh, legislature um, because yeah. So I guess I mean being a pro-life, being pro-life, I guess you're going to have a lot of fight too.
I do. I have sat here in my office doing a video call, and
Mm,
I have been torn down by people who disagree with that. I have gone to, well, a good story. Let's do a good story.
yeah.
Bloomington, Indiana, the Young Republicans held a history on abortion.
Okay.
And my staff and all the other candidates, everyone was like, no, no one's going to this. No one will go to Bloomington, Indiana for a history on abortion. Nope. And so none of the candidates went, but I went.
Mm,
And my staff, they were like, no, don't go, don't go. And I'm like, no, it's I'm going. And so
mm,
I walked in, and they were just shocked to see me there, because it's not a place where a candidate would be. It's taboo to have that discussion. And I
mm,
said, I'm not here as a congressional candidate. I'm here as Dan, and I want to hear what you have to say.
mm.
So I don't need to speak. I just want to sit here and spend this time with you
Listen.
and hear your lesson, and let's go through it. And it was really good. There was a lot of discussion about Bloomington's issue of baby doe, which happened back during the Reagan administration. And there was a gentleman there, I forget his name, but he was an older gentleman, and he made the point. He's like, it's a terrible thing, and I know it's just saddening, and it's terrible for us to talk about this issue. And I said, no. I said, look, everyone, stop. If you are talking about this issue and it hurts in your heart and it hurts right now, that's because you are emotionally, spiritually strong. You
Mhm,
are spiritually connected, and you are strong in what you know is right and wrong.
mhm.
And that is why it hurts. But
Right.
it doesn't mean that we should not talk about it. This week is the week that Jesus went to Jerusalem, and he gets crucified, and he dealt with a lot of issues. And if you've watched The Passion of the Christ, I would say that it's almost similar to the scene where he's in the garden, he's praying to God, and he's
Mm,
saying, I don't think I can do this.
right.
Of course, I'm ad-libbing to what the great said, but in the end, it's that point where the right thing hurts
Oh yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
And that's, I mean,
definitely.
from here to there, that's a long way to get to it, but that's essentially what it is. Spiritually being strong
Mm,
hurts when you emotionally, when you're dealing with those issues and you know that that's wrong.
mhm.
But it was
Right.
a great talk. It was a wonderful group, and I've kept in touch with them, and I will support them on anything they do. That's
Okay.
part of my goal, is to support groups in the
Right.
community.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for the interview. Yeah, I'm sure I'd like to learn more from you, and because
No, I want to come do the tour. I think that would be
yeah,
great. Yeah, and we
definitely
can have
do.
more discussions
Yeah,
and yeah,
and
just want
we also have a coffee shop and boutique there, so
yeah.
we can have coffee there.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
No, hey, thank you. I really appreciate the time and talking to you.
Yeah, same here.